Hello, I'm Lauren Dike, CEO of Knights Consulting, creator of BlackWomanLeading.com, and the host of Black Woman Leading, the podcast. This podcast amplifies the needs and experiences of Black women leaders in the workplace with a holistic focus on three core areas: leadership development, mental wellness, and relationship management. Our ultimate aim is to help Black women learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. Hey there, before we jump into the next podcast episode, I want to share two quick announcements with you. We are just weeks away from the 2025 Black Woman Leading Live Conference and Retreat. It's taking place May 27th through the 30th, 2025 in Virginia Beach. Now, this is our third annual event, and if you haven't heard, this event is the premier leadership development conference to help Black women learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. Now, this is not just an event, it's an experience designed by Black women for Black women. Listen, the Black Woman Leading team, along with our dynamic guest experts that will be there, are going to help you do the hard work and the head work to clarify your career growth strategy, work on refining your leadership skills, and make a plan to tend to your mental wellness and self-care while you are doing all of that. So activities include workshops, panels, wellness breaks, laser coaching, networking, action planning, all of that. Past attendees have shared that this event has been transformative for them and has helped them make critical shifts to take not only their career, but their life to the next level. You need to be in the room, okay? So we have less than 25 seats left until we sell out. So make a plan to get there, talk to your employer, do whatever you got to do and be there with us, okay? You can get all the details and sign up, save your seat at www.bwlretreat.com. And my second announcement for you. Now our full podcast episodes are on YouTube. So you want to see my beautiful face, you want to see the face of our brilliant guests and catch the vibe as we're really having these dynamic conversations. Subscribe to the Black Woman Leading YouTube channel and you can watch the full episodes of the season there. So head on over there and subscribe. Welcome everyone to this episode. I'm really excited to talk about this topic today, getting attuned to your body's wisdom. And our special guest is Lauren Dike, founder of Harmona Inclusive Wellbeing. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. But first, let me give you the official about Lauren. So Lauren Dike is a certified somatic practitioner, nervous system resilience expert, and DEI consultant dedicated to fostering safety, openness, and connection within organizations and individuals. Her work helps organizations evolve by witnessing behaviors rather than shaming them, understanding that behaviors incongruent with compassion, openness, and connection often stem from stress, trauma, or a lack of capacity. By addressing these root causes, Lauren enables transformative behavior change, making authentic connection and collaboration more accessible. So I always say people come with the receipts here, okay? She specializes in working with Black women, focusing on the disproportionate workplace and racial trauma they face. And she partners with collectives like the Iconi Collective, the Criado Studios, and the Center for Black Women's Wellness to create spaces for healing and empowerment through somatic practices, workshops, and speaking. So we're so excited to have Lauren here. How we connected, I think we connected on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, we connected on LinkedIn and she shared a little bit about her work. When I went and started to kind of dig into what she's doing, I was really excited. You all may have heard in last season me talking about some of the work we've been doing to build in more body-based and somatic insights into our Black Women Leading program. So I thought this is timely, it's right on time, and Lauren has really been doing this work both with individuals and with organizations, which I'm really interested to hear about how she's doing the work with organizations. So let's jump right on in, Lauren. We always ask our guests before we start getting into your expertise and all of that, share a little bit about kind of what Black woman leading means to you and your journey as a Black woman leading, how you've come to do this work.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think about leading, I think about this unshakable self-safety and self-knowing that whatever your gift, right, and your purpose is, to walk in that regardless of what society says, regardless of social norms, expectations of others, and to just go for it, right? Yeah. And so when I think about Black women leading, I think there's a lot of societal expectations of us, right? There's a lot of tropes and stereotypes, and it is so easy to want to show up in a way that others expect us to show up in, right? And so true leading is like forgetting about all that, knowing what your purpose is, knowing what your authenticity is, right? And leading with that. And so for me, it's been quite a journey to where I am right now, right? I started off in corporate America in accounting, not because it was my passion, but because I had a father who was Nigerian. And if people know anything about Nigerian fathers and parents, it's like you either are in finance, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or a pharmacist, right? And so I picked it because it was a safe choice. I knew it would make my father happy, right? But I was miserable. And so from there, I transitioned into diversity, equity, inclusion because I wanted to help people that felt like me in workplaces, right? I was often the only in the room. But when I got into DEI, I started to just witness, and I think we'll get into this, how much stress and trauma limit people's capacity to connect. And while I really, really believe in DEI work, I'm like, there's another angle we can take here that might be more effective. And there are people telling me like, oh, that sounds kind of woo-woo, or like, are you sure you want to leave DEI? And little did I know, politics would change the landscape of the DI climate, right? But I knew what my purpose was. I knew what I wanted to do. And so leading for me has just been like following my gut, following my body's wisdom, and really just trying to find alignment with my purpose and trying to stay safe, right? Knowing not that there's no threats possible, but knowing that I can navigate whatever comes my way regardless.
Wow. So we go from accounting to doing this work. And in your bio, I noticed that you refer to yourself as a nervous system resilience expert. Can you share a little bit more about that? And just what does the work look like for you these days with individuals in organizations?
Yeah. So I have I shouldn't say many. I have 3 different prongs of my organization, right? Okay. So I do one-on-one coaching for women specifically, and then I work with larger or medium-sized organizations to do sort of nervous system 101, stress management workshops. And then I work with Black women organizations because of the specific racial-based traumatic stress that Black women go through. And so I think when Black women specifically hear the word resilience, it can feel triggering, right? Because it's like, I've been resilient all of my life. Yeah. But I like to tell people resilience isn't enduring, right? There's this thought around what resilience means, like it's breaking us down, it's enduring, it's having to put up with. But true nervous system resilience is actually creating capacity to hold stress, right? To discharge trauma from the body, but also to be able to bounce out of things and restore back to your original state, right? Because stress breaks us down. Stress changes the state of our nervous system and how we're operating in the world. And so resilience is actually not like telling you to change or endure anything. It's actually creating more capacity to restore yourself back to who you were before all of this stress and trauma happened, whether it was on personal experiences, right, or intergenerational. And so the core of my work, right, is a both educational and experiential component. Just because to experience nervous system healing and regulation, the awareness and the experience is crucial. Yeah. And so when I'm working with large groups, oftentimes understanding how the nervous system works, how a lot of our behaviors are often automatic and subconscious, subcortical, right, is validating for people because they're like, oh, like I shamed myself when I felt angry or when I felt like I had to procrastinate, right? And it's like, no, this is all happening because your nervous system is trying to keep you safe, right? And so there's a portion of that can take 1 to 2 hours to explain, depending on the workshop, right? And then we get into the experiential part. So now that you understand the nervous system, how do you understand your unique nervous system? Because we're all bio-individual, uniquely coded. And so we
Right.
do some activities so people can start to reflect how their individual nervous system is reacting and responding to things. So once you have that cognitive awareness, right, that conscious awareness, you can start to bridge what's happening on a subconscious level into a conscious level.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so from there, we go into then emotional processing, integration work. So, like, now that you have the tools, how do you integrate into your real life? And so, I think what I love about this nervous system work is that it can be strictly educational on how the nervous system works, but then it can also be broken out into themes, right? And so, I do workshops on boundaries, I do workshops on people pleasing and fawning, right? And so,
Yeah.
I think it's really cool because once you understand how the nervous system works, you can start to relate it to different struggles you have in your life and start to implement tools that are backed by science to start to reverse some of those behaviors that aren't working for your benefit.
Yeah, I love the emphasis on when you talked about nervous system resilience is about increasing capacity, but not just capacity to hold, right? But to
Mm-hmm.
also understand, discharge, regulate, integrate, all of these kind of things. And I think that's the trigger when people hear resilience, that it's about my ability to be a good punching bag
Yeah.
essentially, and that's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you deal with the stuff that's coming to you, but also figure out how to discharge that, because you can't hold it all. And
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize where you're holding it is in your body, all of the
Exactly.
time, not just in your mind. You think about it, but you're holding that in your body. So I love this work that you're doing, both on the educational level, but also this experiential factor as well. Very exciting.
Yes, yeah. And I just
Okay.
wanted to piggyback on that capacity thing
Yeah.
because a lot of people think too, it's like the capacity to feel discomfort and stress, but also some people have trouble holding joy and pleasure.
Yes.
It's like they're
Yes.
so conditioned to being constantly upset, right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's about creating capacity to feel more joy because that could be uncomfortable for people as well.
Yeah, and the shame sometimes that people feel around joy, because they have been
Yes.
taught cultural scripts, systemic racism, that is decadent or that is wasteful, right? Versus a critical part of your overall well-being. Oh, I
Yes.
love it. Oh, this is my kind of talk. Okay, now the topic of the podcast today is getting attuned to your body's wisdom. So can you
Mhm.
break down that? What does that mean about being attuned to your body's wisdom, and what gets in the way? What gets in the way of our ability to do that?
Yeah. So we're all naturally born with this wisdom of what we want to do, right? When we're in our mother's wombs, we're feeling around and we like can feel our boundaries. When we come out of the womb, we learn the world by putting things in our mouth, right? By
Mhm.
crawling, by touching things. And so even if you think about like a baby that you hold, right, and it squirms out of your arms and it's like, I don't want to be held right now, or we
Yeah.
cry when we want to cry. And somewhere along the journey, either through our parents, maybe through life experiences, we learn to be more externally focused, right? And so, like, my parents upset, I need to act this way in order so they can
Yeah.
feel okay, so then I can
Yeah.
feel okay, right? Or my parents not giving me attention. What can I do to get that attention? Because the only way as a child I'm achieving safety is through my parents.
Yep.
But that attachment continues throughout life, and our nervous system learns that pattern of interacting with people, right? And so we start to become more externally focused for our safety instead of internally. And so what gets in the way really are those life experiences, what we perceive as too much or overwhelming trauma, right? And I
Yeah.
always like to say it's how our nervous system is perceiving something, right? It's not the event itself.
Right.
And so when we go through all these life experiences and these relational ruptures, it gets us further away from connecting to what we truly need. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is it never really goes away. We just learn to sort of like ignore it. So, for
Yeah.
example, like if your friend asks you to hang out and you're tired, there's like a part of you that's like, oh, I don't want to do it. But then you say yes anyway, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, getting attuned to your body's needs is really getting attuned to the sensations that your body is trying to speak to you that we often have ignored or pushed down or
Yeah.
suppressed.
Yeah. So it's kind of reconditioning, because it's not finding you've had this, it came with you, but it's kind of reconditioning those muscles to listen, to hear, to understand the sensations and what those might mean for you. Yeah.
Exactly. And so,
Oh,
and it's ironic because when we're stressed, right? We live in our heads, but yet we're only working with the most reptilian, primitive part of our brain. And so if we can just relax our body and allow the rational part of our brain to come back online, sometimes that's enough to get like to attune to what do I rationally need, right? I'm not always
yeah.
living in survival mode. If I say no, this will happen, right? And so it really is about just like relaxing the body, that then relaxing the mind, and then sometimes you
Yeah.
can be more attuned that way as well.
Yeah, and I love the reference to like us as babies. Over the part of my early training as a therapist included some somatic work, and then moving away from being a clinician. You know this information. You may utilize it some for yourself, but it was kind of a little dusty, right? And
Mm,
so one of the things that in the last 2 years or so that really kind of re ignited my interest to want to dive more into this and see how we can integrate more of this into Black Woman Leading was actually supporting my son, my 9-year-old
mm,
son, who was experiencing some anxiety, and we were getting him some support. But because I'm just such, like many mothers, a hawk watching my child and noticing all these different things, I was noticing how everything was manifesting physically for him, his
mm.
stimming behaviors, how he would hunker down when he was, in a public place and feeling unsafe. And it just, because children are not, especially he's not quite hit that preteen or that teenage age where you're really aware of like, okay, people are going to think I'm weird if I'm doing this. He was eight,
Right.
7, 8. So he didn't have the awareness. So he's just responding in his physical body when we're out in the open. And that was a trigger to me and my husband, like, okay, so here's some support that he needs. But in supporting him and his watching his journey and being part of his therapeutic process over this last year and a half, 2 years, just that how visceral the
Mhm.
response was in his physical body, and how that was giving us cues of what support we needed, how we needed to help him to regulate, how we needed to help him to find his words. It was really like, dang, we've gotten away. Like, look how much data his body is just giving me as an external
Yes.
viewer. And it really started me to think back to my own practice, my own relationship with my body, and then the people I serve. And so I
Mm.
love, we can watch children for so much wisdom about this stuff. And it really is. I'm so happy that you brought that up, because I think people will, even if you're disconnected from yourself, if you have any connection to children, babies,
Mhm.
little ones, you can start to get some education that'll support you in this area as well. So this is really good. So as you kind of highlight this, getting back in connection to our body's wisdom, what are some ways that we can begin to strengthen that, or to reconnect that for ourselves?
Yeah. So for some people it's a long process, right? Because when our nervous system is dysregulated, and what dysregulated means is that it's constantly activated even in the absence of physical danger, right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
the times we confuse emotional overwhelm with literally being chased down by a tiger or physical danger, right? And so when we're in a state of dysregulation, we can either be stuck in fight or flight, which looks like anxiety, right? Anger. But if we're in that state for too long, our body will literally go into what we call dorsal vagal, or shut down.
Yeah.
And so when we're in shutdown, we're disassociated from our body, right? Feeling our body is like impossible. And so that's a lot of the times why people ignore their needs too. They're just in their heads and their body is like numb,
Numb.
right?
Yeah, numb. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you're stuck in fight or flight, you have all of these sensations that are overwhelming because they need to be discharged, and you try to escape your body because it's too overwhelming, right? And so the first step is always the regulation safety, right? And so using movement, using touch, using sensory input, right?
Yeah.
To bring your body back to homeostasis.
Yeah.
And so that is what somatics is, right? It's a Greek word that means of the body. So using the body, the language of the body, to regulate and create safety within.
Yeah.
And for some people, they say on average regulation, right, takes 4 to 6 weeks. But for some people, it can take years because they're
Wow.
so dysregulated, right? But the cool thing is that every time you do it, you're building new neural pathways. So your body's learning like, oh, I can shift out of this more easily, right? And I might start to do it automatically.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people the first step is to work with what we call the perimeter, just your body, because going inside your body is going to be too overwhelming for most of us that are dysregulated. So starting to work with the perimeter to create more homeostasis, more regulation.
Yeah.
And then after that, that's when we can titrate into feeling the sensations, right? Creating space for them, pendulating between what might feel tense, what might feel loose, right? And then doing some of that. Like, I think you mentioned that you do the internal family systems parts work and child work. What are the sensations coming from? What are they trying to protect you from? You know, what do they need to feel safe? And that's how you create the capacity, because now you can feel your body. The sensations aren't this threat, right? You're just holding them in a different way. They're still there, but you're holding them in a different way because you have that safety.
Yeah. Can you give just an example of that kind of perimeter work, right? Just because there might be some people that this is a completely new type. What does that mean when we say, I'm just going to work on the peripheral or the perimeter to regulate? What's an example of that?
Yeah. So the way that I work with the perimeter is through somatic movement. And so to understand what sort of movement you need to understand what state you're in. So we just went over it. If you're in fight or flight, you have all of this anxious energy, right, that wants to mobilize. And so you need to do something to discharge it. And so a really great way to do it, how animals in the wild do it, right, is just shake. Animals in the wild, if they've encountered something stressful, if they don't excessively shake it off, their pack will reject them, right? And so just shaking, doing something like tree shaking like this, or just shaking your whole body standing up is a great way to start to regulate. Again, bring yourself back to homeostasis. If you are in dorsal vagal shutdown, everything has immobilized, right? You're essentially playing dead from your threat. So in this state, you actually need to create physical sensations on the body to remind yourself like you're here.
I'm alive.
And so that, so that can just look like rubbing your hands, rubbing your body, squeezing your body, right? And then gently mobilizing energy, because you have the energy is slowed down. And so I like to use the spine a lot for that, because the sympathetic nervous system, or fight or flight, is a spinal system. And so that's how we utilize our energy. And so by just like swaying side to side, right, doing spinal twists gently, it's a great way to get you out of that dorsal vagal. And so it's a little bit, that's a high level, but that's what I mean when I say working with the perimeter. We're not worrying about any emotions that might be too overwhelming, not any sensations, but just moving the body, the perimeter of the body.
Yeah. And you're trying to get that energy out or wake it up to let you know that you are alive.
Exactly.
I do sometimes part of my bedtime process, I'll do some shaking or some movement activities, just because of sensory overload, doing so much stuff during the day and feeling so full, or, you know, not able to bring yourself down, that kind of thing. So it's good to know that there are some self practices that you can do. When would you say, Lauren, an indicator that you might need to bring in some professional support outside of just self practices that you can do?
So I would recommend anyone work with a professional if you're dealing with chronic stress, nervous system dysregulation. But I think what's also important to note is that I think on Instagram, TikTok, there's a lot of influencers that are like, just regulate your nervous system and your life is going to be great, right?
Yeah.
And it gives people false hope that just movement is going to heal them. But again, there's that emotional processing piece and integration work that requires a professional. And so, for example, even me as a somatic practitioner, I have a somatic practitioner I work with to do my parts work and my inner healing work, because just being guided can help support you to know when you've met your capacity, because a trained professional can know, like, I don't want to overwhelm you even more and stress you even more while you're healing, right? But also provide prompts, right? And reflections, and help you through the healing process. So I would say 100% of the people would benefit from working with a professional.
Everybody. Okay.
Right.
Because the self practices are often about coping, but like Lauren is saying, if you need to heal, if you need to process, if you need to go into some scary places and kind of see how this is showing up now, the shaking alone is not going to help you to do that. You're going to have to do some additional work as well. Okay. Now, you referenced early the fawning. I feel like a lot of people here have heard fight or flight. They have heard that with regard to stress and trauma, how we might respond to that. But this fawning, this people pleasing. When we talked earlier, you referenced it as a key survival tactic for many Black women in the workplace in particular. So can you talk a little bit about this fawning, the people pleasing, how that shows up, and how do you see it showing up in the workplace for Black women?
Yeah. So fawning is a blended state, which means it has characteristics of fight or flight and characteristics of dorsal vagal, right? So we're in this weird state where we're like, I want to mobilize, but I feel immobilized. And it's happening at a subconscious level, right? It's often reflexive. And so what we're essentially trying to do, if we think back to primitive times, is we see a perpetrator and we don't see that we can run away from it. Playing dead doesn't seem quite appropriate. So we're literally trying to regulate our perpetrator as a way to feel safe.
Ooh,
And it's one of the most
description. That's a good description. Yeah.
Yes. And it's one of the most exhaustive states, right? Because I don't feel safe, but I'm trying to regulate you when I don't feel safe, right? And so I think as Black women, first of all, on an intergenerational level, right, our ancestors who were slaves had to fawn to survive, right? What does my master need and want? How do I put their needs above my needs so I survive or don't get abused, right? And then I think also our parents. I had parents who were the only Black family in the neighborhood. So make sure your hair isn't sticking up. Don't scratch your hair because people are going to think you're dirty, right? Always smile at white people, right? And it's like, if a white person's rude to me, why should I have to smile at them? But we didn't want to appear as the angry, nasty, dirty Black family, right? Yeah. And so I think when we get into corporate America, all of this conditioning, both on a subconscious and conscious level, we're just hyper vigilant of how we're being perceived, right? We have to code switch. We're aware of how we're wearing our hair. If people are going to ask if, is your hair real or is it fake? Or can I touch your hair, right? And so it puts us in this state where our nervous system has now interpreted safe as regulating others and putting others first.
Yes.
And so again, it's one of the most exhaustive states. A lot of the times people think they're introverted or antisocial because when they get home, they just feel exhausted, but it's because they've been performing, they've been fawning all day, and it only makes sense that they need to recover when they get home.
Yes.
And so, it's something that I think is very hard to get out of. And I think it's still very much a survival tactic because stereotype threat is a thing. Discrimination is a thing. Yeah. Bias is very real. So sometimes just to get by, it actually is a sophisticated response of the body, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really powerful. I was watching a video, like a little short social media reel the other day, and it was these two Black women talking about this default response that one of the ladies had of like stepping out of the way of people, white people in particular, in the grocery store. You are in the aisle shopping just like somebody else. There's space to move past, but there's always deference too, always, not taking up space, limiting the space that you're taking up. And they were having this dialogue, and the lady was like, it's not until somebody pointed it out that I realized that I'm even doing that. And so I think that's why it's so difficult for people. We talk about fawning a lot in Black Woman Leading, and how people are learning to realize that safety that they're taking, a safety that they feel to take up more space and those kind of things. But it's so embedded a lot of times, like you said, from our families of origin, from the society, systemic things, that just the awareness is really major first. And then, the behavior change and the healing that has to happen for people to choose to do other things. But it's a process, y'all. This is a process.
Yes. I still struggle. Even like now as we're speaking, I'm aware of that. I'm always trying to be like super validating, like nodding my head, right? That is a form of fawning. Like if I'm just here listening to you, I don't need, this is no offense to you, but I don't need to make you feel safe, right? Like I can just be calm in my body. So it's just like these little micro actions too that you don't always realize that add up. So yeah, it's a process for sure.
It's a process. Now, just on that point, I thought that when we talked before, you referenced fawning as leading to burnout sometimes, or self-abandonment. Talk a little bit about that, because that's powerful language, self-abandonment.
Yeah. So I think whenever, again, you're thinking about someone else's needs before your own, you're abandoning yourself. Yeah. And I think what's really dangerous about that and I saw it happen in my life, you start becoming resentful, and then
Mm.
the other people, the other person doesn't even understand why. Like, it's not their fault that you were fawning, right? But it's, you start to get angry because your body's just like, I've had enough of this, right? I
Yeah.
need to protect myself now, right? Because anger is a protection state. And so then anger can happen, and then you have these relational ruptures that could have been prevented if you had just honored your needs to begin with. And
Wow.
so you're literally not thinking about your needs or ignoring your needs when you're fawning. And so it's probably one of the most trickiest, I guess, pervasive forms of self abandonment, because sometimes we're doing it on a minute by minute basis, right?
Minute by minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 This is powerful. So let's say that, someone is listening. This is resonating. It is, light bulbs are coming on for them, and they're wanting to learn more. They're wanting to move more closely toward getting more attuned to their body's wisdom. What would you say are some of the first steps that people can take to go in that direction?
Yeah. So I think one of the first steps is to literally just slow down. Because a lot of fawning is reflexive and impulsive, it's because we're moving fast that we're ignoring the signals of our body. And
Yeah.
so a great first step is to give yourself time and or space when someone is asking you to do something, or if you feel compelled to volunteer yourself for something, and just try to check in as if you really want to do it,
Yeah.
right? Because we have a lot of expectations on us. When our parents say, like, call your grandmother, right? And you have an inner knowing you don't have the capacity, right? Or the energy for it, and you push through it. That's just further reinforcing that fawning is keeping you safe. So the more
Yeah.
you can disrupt those behaviors, the more you can allow your nervous system even to trust you in that pause, to recalibrate and understand what you really want to do. And so a great thing that I like to do, right, if I'm like looking at someone in the screen asking me something, just like turning away, right? Sometimes that can be helpful for your body to just like process and know I'm not like pinned down. I don't have pressure on me to reflexively appease
Yeah.
someone, right?
Yeah.
Or just creating more space. Like if you're in the same vicinity as someone, that can be super, super helpful. But then also just time. Can I get back to you, right? Can I think about that?
Yeah. Not having to say yes right away. And I think that's a really actionable step that there's probably daily opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
just practice that. Just the awareness of, one, you can take a pause. What does that feel like for you to do that? Does that feel like something that's courageous for you to do that? Or is it just that I don't even think about it? Wow, I didn't
Right.
even realize I could say, let me get back to you. That kind of thing. I love it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's some of this is baby steps, y'all. It's awareness, and let's take a step. It's a lifelong practice, right? It is
Yes.
nothing that we're going to conquer overnight, because the current state didn't happen overnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is, I could talk about this all day, Lauren. It's so much to unpack here. I, I want to transition and get your take on a couple of our core questions for this season as well. But are there any like kind of final points or really important points you want to make about this topic before we transition to those questions?
Yeah, I think, no, I think this was a great conversation. And I think the more that people can understand, again, their nervous systems and trying to just understand the patterns of their behavior,
Yeah.
the more, again, they're going to be able to change that behavior, right? Because the nervous system is built for patterns. So if you're fawning at work, you're likely fawning at home, right? You're likely
Mm-hmm.
fawning at the grocery store. And so these patterns find their way in every area of your life. And so the more you can identify, like, oh, when I feel discomfort, I go to fawning, or when I feel discomfort, I go to anger or fight, right? The
Yeah.
more you can start to disrupt them or just explore them, again, in an unshaming way, because your body is doing it to protect you for a
Yeah.
reason, the more success you're going to have in this healing journey.
Yeah, there's grace, and you can become a studier of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. So, we also love in these episodes to hear a little bit about your kind of professional experience, given that that's a big focus at Black Woman Leading. So this season's theme is driving the narrative of your career. And we're really thinking about how we set a vision for ourselves, how we're able to go after that, advocate for ourselves along the way. So I love to ask you, because I think it's inspiring for our listeners to hear, these stories from other people. Can you tell us about a time where you kind of had a vision something that you wanted to do and you were able to realize that? What supported you to be able to realize that?
Yeah, I think right now I'm living my vision, and it keeps on evolving
Yeah.
every single day or month, it feels like, right? And I'm allowing it to come to me because I think that when you're forcing things, right, it creates more pressure. And then again, it puts you in that survival based thinking that limits your
Yes.
creativity. And so it is very uncomfortable. I'm relying on a lot of savings, but I've never felt so fulfilled in my life. And I think what has kept me grounded is this nervous system work, right? Like
Yeah.
I am feeling a lot of sensations of discomfort, and typically this would tell me to stop or that I'm doing something wrong. But instead, I'm holding them, knowing like, oh, thank you. Like these are sensations that are trying to protect me based on past experiences, but they're not needed right now. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean I shouldn't be going and pursuing my goals and dreams.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what has helped me too is looking at money as energy and as a resource. I think there's a lot of people that are like, don't give your work away for free, right? Don't give too much for free online.
Yeah.
But how I started was doing a lot of stuff for free, doing a lot of free stuff online because I realized I wanted to build that trust, but also practice my work, right? Because I
Yeah.
realized if I was just focusing on marketing and networking, I would be losing some of my skill set. And
Yeah.
so it worked to my benefit because I focused strictly on education and sharing for free. And now there's paying stuff rolling in and almost like
Yeah.
too fast, almost, right? But I feel like I deserve it, right? Sometimes when it comes in, I'm like, oh, I feel like this is like, why do they want me? But I'm like, no, Lauren, you did a lot of free stuff. You worked really hard on your own healing journey. And
Hello.
this is coming because you're setting the stage for it, right? You're building the presence where people want you more. And
Yeah.
so I think two things that have helped me is sticking to my plan and my purpose, knowing that's going to be uncomfortable and I'm going to have some self doubt, but I can hold that, knowing I also have a lot of confidence. But then also not worrying about money too much, knowing that it's
Hmm.
just resource, it's just an energy, and it will be a byproduct of me living in my purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a process, right? Especially if
Mhm.
just from one entrepreneur to another, coming from an environment where, if nothing else, that paycheck was set. But the paycheck is not always set in the land of
Yes.
entrepreneurship until you get
Yeah.
some systems and your cash flow and your pipeline and all that kind of stuff together. So yeah, you're on the journey, sister, doing some amazing work, doing some amazing work.
Yeah.
um what about this, a time where you had to advocate for yourself? You had to be the voice and advocate for something that you needed or something that you wanted. Have an example of
Yeah.
that.
I feel like like all my life I've had to fight. Like it's the one thing I can say about me is like I am a recovering fawner, but I've always been someone where fairness and equity has been super important to me. Even as a child, I've always spoken up on it. And so I've been in workplaces where I've discovered that people doing less, right, have been making more money than me.
Yeah.
And people think it's taboo to ask people what they make, but I think it's one of the most important and crucial
Yep.
things you can do because in order to be equitable, you have to compare yourself to others, right?
Yep.
And so I've had pushback when I've mentioned to leaders, they're like, Lauren, you're comparing yourself too much to others. But I'm like, how else am I going to tell if things are equitable, right? And so I've had conversations where I've spoken up about my pay and how I didn't think it was fair and I deserved an
Yeah.
increase. And it's happened two times. And I remember being like terrified before. And both conversations led to me getting reasonable pay increases, right?
Yeah.
And so I know it doesn't always work out for all people, but there's a saying, if you don't ask, you're never going to receive. And
Hello.
so I think advocating for me to be paid my worth has been really powerful for me in the past.
Yeah, I love that. And you could feel the fear, but you need to do it anyway,
Mhm.
because sometimes no one is coming to save you. And so
Right.
being able to ask that question, challenge it, it'll have to come from you. So thank you for that. Here's my last one. And you've been talking about this self-care all day with this topic, right? But to pursue these visions, to pursue our dreams, all these things that we're talking about now, we need to be well. And you talked about like doing your own healing work is helping you see a return in your business now, right? So in
Mhm.
this season, Lauren, what are some ways that you're taking care of yourself these days?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, self-care literally means caring for yourself, because
Yeah.
I think even when people have routines, it can become like checkboxy. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, people say I have to meditate, let me meditate, but you're not like resonating with it, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, it's been a lot of tending to my capacity and just like literally going inside of myself. What do you need? And so I go through different phases of doing different things. Or sometimes when meditation is just I'm not resonating with it. So I'll use more movement in the morning, right?
Yeah.
But I think a key for me has been creating at least 30 minutes to 1 hour in the morning to just focus on me. So whether it's just like, using movement to get in tune with my body, listening to music and dancing, journaling and speaking to my inner child, that has been really powerful to just set the tone for my day, but also set intention for my day.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also just, again, with being a recovering fawner, not feeling guilt when I have to cancel on things. Being an entrepreneur I've been building new neural pathways, thinking in new ways. And people
Yeah.
don't realize how exhausting that can be when you have like nothing to really show for it. And so a lot of the time last year, I didn't have a lot of clients, but I was so exhausted and I
Yeah.
had to take space from family and friends who wanted to hang out. So I'm like, I just don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
And that was powerful for me because now I feel like it made me come into this season this year with more energy to connect with people in a more powerful way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the phrase you said, tending to my capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Tending to my capacity. I love that. We think of tending to our garden, tending to our, all of these different things, but tending to my capacity. That's powerful. I'm going to take that away
Yeah.
from today. Well, this has been lovely talking to you, Lauren. Where can
Yes.
people kind of connect with you? And is there anything you have going on that would be great for our listeners to know about?
Yeah, so I'm most active on LinkedIn. So my name is Lauren Dike, spelled just the way it's on screen, Dike. I'm also on Instagram. It's Harmona Wellbeing. And on my website, which is harmona.org, I have an events page, and I have lots of events that go on probably monthly. I think something I'm really excited about is a retreat I'm doing with Iconi. So it's going to be in December. No, I'm sorry. It's going to be May 16th in
Okay.
DC. That was where the
Okay.
T was coming from. And so again, information is on my website, but yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. We'll put all of those links in our show notes so people can access them easily. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode today.
I
First of all,
did.
I mean, I really enjoyed it. I hope you listening enjoyed it. Got some takeaways, some nuggets to go and explore on your own. We encourage you to share this episode with your network. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your mama. I mean, tell everybody, okay? Because this is some really powerful insight that's helping us to be well, helping us to grow, helping us to lead. So we are on all streaming platforms. You can find us anywhere. If you want to connect with Black Woman Leading, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook at Black Woman Leading. Woman is singular. You can also learn about everything we have going on, programs, events, etc. at blackwomanleading.com. If you'd like to connect with me personally, I'm Laura E. Knights. I am very active on LinkedIn, also on Instagram. And then if you'd like to hear about the work we do with organizations or learn about how we can collaborate in that way, you can check out our corporate site at knightsconsultinggroup.com. We love to connect with you in any of these ways. And until next time, be well.